Power Breakfast. Top talk of the morning.
The time is 7:14. You're on Power Breakfast with Tessa as we still try and find the President's spokesperson. I'm sure there's a lot going on this morning, but hopefully we will still get him. We've also invited Dr. Susan Booysen, political analyst, political economic analyst at times as well, but definitely somebody who's well versed in politics and governance in South Africa. Dr. Booysen, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Welcome to Power Breakfast.
Good morning, Tessa. Good to speak to you.
I think it might be the first time I speak to you on the radios. So,
Indeed,
yeah, this is our virginal conversation, as it were. So thank you so much for agreeing to this conversation. So yesterday, I was left very underwhelmed by the ConCourt's decision, because what it didn't do is take us into the merits of the case and take us into its view on the merits. And I found it quite a fascinating day. I don't know how you experienced listening to those arguments, but what are your thoughts now that the ConCourt has essentially kicked this down the road or down to the lower courts if the MK party pursues it?
Indeed, this was a fascinating verdict that we heard yesterday. And my first impression listening to it was that the ConCourt decided to take the low-hanging fruit of constitutional jurisprudence of really taking an easy route out by kicking it down the road, or in essence, for the time being, throwing it out of court. Because on the question of jurisdiction and should there have been direct access, and the ConCourt then ruling, no, there isn't direct access. The ConCourt doesn't engage with this in the kind of language they use. And if we look generally, and the MKP was also very quick to point out, but in that 2016-2017 period up to 2021, there were a few very high-profile cases, and mostly concerning Zuma and the Zondo Commission and accountability to Parliament in light of his corruption cases and Kandla, etc. There were a few cases where direct access was granted. And the MKP and former President Zuma, in their case, had counted on that carrying through into this case. The ConCourt ruled no, and Justice Matopa ruled no, that is not the case. And they accepted senior counsel Kate Hofmeyer's argument on that point, that if they allow this case in, then there would be an absolute flood of other cases, anything concerning the president's powers possible, that would hit an already overburdened ConCourt. And there, Hofmeyer really spoke the kind of language that the justices relate to.
Yeah. And
so that was an easy one for them to do that, instead of going into the territory of having a legal opinion verdict on whether Ramaphosa should have fired or put on special leave, sends Mchunu, or whether he has the right to appoint as an acting minister a non-parliamentarian. Yeah. And so those are the cases that really would have been interesting to hear the ConCourt on. But then they probably did not want to go there, and did not want to go there on this very short notice period of roughly 10 days.
Yeah.
And it would have been a very difficult one, to conclude this argument, a very difficult one to cast the verdict on, because the Constitution is not very clear. The Constitution is clear that the President has powers,
and the power to even bring somebody in who's not in Parliament. I think that is undisputed. It's about whether or not you could have this acting minister coming in while you have Senzo Mchunu on absence or leave of absence or special leave, or however it's couched.
Yeah, but we must accept that the Constitution is also really not very specific on it.
Yeah.
It is generally assumed that the President has wide-ranging powers when it comes to constituting and managing his cabinet. And it would have been a very big task for the ConCourt to form opinions on that.
And just to get into a little bit of the legal stuff, I know that you aren't a legal analyst per se, but for me, the question that also arose in all of this is, if not the ConCourt dealing with something that is seen to be about the president's powers vested in the Constitution, is this a High Court matter? Is this something you take to the High Court and ask them about those constitutional powers first? And I think eventually this then ends up back in the ConCourt, surely.
Yes, indeed. That was a strong part of the argument, that the High Court has got a special facility for these urgent applications and that it should have gone that route. Maybe it would have ended up in the ConCourt anyway. I think the MK party, in its case, bargained on that.
Yeah.
And that, yes, the ConCourt was just not going to engage with this matter at this stage.
Sure. Let's bring in the spokesperson for the president, Vincent Magwenya, at this point. Thank you so much, Mr. Magwenya, for joining us this morning. The president sighing a bit of relief at this point, but of course, this doesn't necessarily clear up the questions about whether or not his actions were in line with the Constitution or not. Those questions will persist because the court has not actually pronounced on them.
Good morning, Tessa, and good morning to your listeners. Well, from the president's perspective, the president remains firm of the view that he acted within the ambit of the Constitution. So if you understand the actual process, what has happened, the president has appointed Professor Kachalia as a minister. You can say as a minister without portfolio or a minister in the national executive. Following the swearing-in of the minister this morning, the president will then designate Minister Kachalia to the portfolio of police, or rather the Ministry of Police. And so if you follow that process, you will realize that it's within the parameters of the Constitution and within the powers and in accord to the president. The issue of placing Minister Mchunu on special leave is an issue of due process. Firing Minister Mchunu will have been punitive, and the president could not take punitive action against Minister Mchunu on the basis of allegations that have not been tested.
Vincent,
and so,
yes. Yeah, let me just stop you on that one so we don't get too many more points, because we've already compounded a few points there. On the question of Minister Mchunu, what I understood the issue to be here is twofold. One is that you say that the president is following due process, but there are other times where the president just uses his prerogative and to sack somebody. And we've seen other presidents as well, that the president is not bound to the same kind of process that somebody, who's hired someone in a firm is, because the president has a prerogative where he does not have to give reasons for dismissing somebody. And so to think of the president asking somebody to be relieved of their role as punitive would be to assume that in other instances where the president has done that, he was trying to mete out punishment. I don't think that is true.
No, you have to look at what got us here. What got us here is that Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi made a set of allegations against the minister. And on the basis of those allegations, which have not been tested, the president decided not to fire Minister Mchunu and decided to be fair in that regard and to allow the commission to get to the bottom of these allegations and test them properly. So if you look at other cases, those cases are very much different in substance and form with respect to the matters that are facing Minister Mchunu.
But even if it was just at a political level of trust, if the president came to a view, for example, that there was not trust anymore in Senzo Mchunu in that role, just for the sake of the role not being jeopardized, he could easily say, I'm just doing this in order to protect the role so that this does not become something that, clogs up the system, as it were, and that Mr. Mchunu is being asked to step aside, not because I believe that he's guilty, but because I would like him to not, and these allegations and all of that he has to deal with, to not cloud this, the role that he's in. But the second point, and it was made to some extent within the court process, but one that I've harped on here, is then we're then going to be paying Senzo Mchunu while he's on the special leave, and paying now the new minister this morning, Minister Feroz Kachalia. And the point that Dale Mpofu made, I think that was quite important, is what happens if this judicial inquiry extends for a longer period of time? What if it extends for a year? What if it extends for 2 years? Do we then just continue to pay a double salary where it would not cost the president anything to say to Mr. Mchunu, you can step aside for the time being, because he could hire him and reinstate him at any point?
Well, that's your last point. That's an administrative issue, which I think the president, as the head of the national executive and the head of state, has some discretion over.
Yes.
But on your first point, Tessa, the reality is that up until Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi surfaced these allegations, the president had no reason whatsoever to be concerned about Minister Mchunu's performance.
Yeah,
there was no evidence whatsoever that Minister Mchunu is compromised or is compromising the work of the police force up until the moment General Mkhwanazi surfaced the allegations. And so the issue of trust does not arise at this stage. All you have are allegations, and those allegations are going to be tested in an appropriate and competent platform.
All right.
And only thereafter the president will be able to then take action.
All right. Titi from Kagiso, quick question to Vincent Magwenya.
Yes, thank you very much. I just want to find out from the gentleman there. Now we've got almost 3 ministers and also a deputy. Couldn't they just say, in the meantime, while there is these set allegations that, in his view, they are still unfounded or untested yet, why couldn't they then say, let the deputy minister assume that role, other than having to appoint another minister? So it's like we've got a deputy minister that is useless. Why can't we use that opportunity and use them? Thank you.
Vincent?
So constitutionally, deputy ministers don't act as ministers. That's the function of the Constitution. What the gentleman is raising here as a scenario will have meant one of the deputy ministers being effectively promoted to the role of minister, something that the president did not want to consider in that regard.
I guess the question would then be why the president has made the decisions that he has, and if he is willing to take us into his confidence around his thinking. And I think that may help a lot, Vincent. But thank you so much for giving us the president's perspective on this. That's Vincent Magwenya, the president's spokesperson. That was also Booysen earlier, a professor and political analyst.